Hello, and welcome to the Focus Series, a podcast channel by the American University of Armenia's Media Lab. My name is Narek Ghazaryan, and I'm the Chief Communications Officer here at the university, and I have the absolute pleasure of hosting Cheryl Edison today from Edison International as our guest, a fellow San Franciscan.
Yay, San Francisco.
Yay, San Francisco. Is it part of Silicon Valley?
Oh my goodness. Sometimes people stand in my living room and they're sitting in my couch and they're like, "Where's Silicon Valley?" I'm like, "You're sitting in it."
You're sitting in it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly.
I watched one of your interviews to kind of prep for this conversation, and you were like, Silicon Valley. San Francisco is part of Silicon Valley, so I thought that was cute, which I agree. My dear, welcome to Armenia. Welcome to the American University. We're just so excited to have you here with us. I have a set of questions that I've prepared for us to kind of chit-chat about. But before that, I wanted to kind of start off with this general question. My dear, you have had a very successful career starting from a very young age as far as building companies, starting companies, and someone with your capacity, caliber, would have had the corner office, making a ton of money, living the best life. But you've decided to kind of give back and support other entrepreneurs, startups, kind of helping them with their journey. So my question is, at what point did you realize that you wanted to give back and work with other entrepreneurs, startups, and kind of help them with their journey into launching their companies?
So first of all, please forgive me for my voice. I caught some little bug on the plane, so I'll be doing my best. If you can't understand what I'm saying, let me know and I'll try again.
All right. Sounds good.
So here's the thing for me. I began my career in Barcelona, Spain. I didn't speak Spanish at the time, and I was 17 years old. And I was hired as the secretary of a non-existent international division. And the idea the gentleman had was to expand his company beyond the borders of Spain into many other countries around Spain. And so over the next few years, I was launching his company into 13 other countries around Europe. So from that moment, I recognized that this was my greatest joy, to bring someone's vision and someone's dream beyond their own borders. And I've been doing it ever since.
Wow. So tell me a little bit more about that. Like, how did you come to that? Like, you're born and raised in the U.S., right?
Yeah.
And how did the move to Spain happen?
Right. So I was born in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, okay, cool.
In a small little enclave, like your basic, middle American reality. My parents divorced, and my mother married a man in the military.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he was assigned to military bases and then to Indian reservations. And in that context, I was the only one that looked like me, right? So at the military bases, it was largely populated by Black Americans. And in the Indian reservations, they were all Indians. And so I was suddenly a much not appreciated person. In fact, I was hated. And so I grew up from the time I was 8 years old until the time I left home being hated for who I am, for the color of my skin. So this is a very interesting perspective, which then caused me to discover at the ripe old age of 15 that it was time to leave home. I left home because I wanted to find my own way. I wanted to contribute something. I wanted to do something that was bigger than myself. I wanted to give something in some way, and I didn't know what it was. But I knew that if I stayed the path that my parents had us on, I wasn't going to be doing much other than defending myself. And that wasn't very interesting or enjoyable. So I left home. I left high school. I decided to test into university. So I tested into university, 15. I stayed a little bit. I left right away. And I began looking for myself in the world.
I see.
That brought me to Europe for the first time at 17. And walking down a street in Paris, this is the real story, okay? You may not want this on the podcast, but this is the real story. Walking down the street in Paris, I ended up in front of a salon because a woman who was with me needed to get a haircut. And I told her to go inside to get a rendezvous. This is one of the very few words I had. And as I was there, I was watching this man cut in the window. He saw me. I had hair to my waist. And he sent someone out to me who spoke to me first in French and then in Italian and then in German and finally in English said, Monsieur Jongeras would like to cut your hair.
Oh my God.
And will pay you.
Wow.
So here I was. I had $200, 2 weeks left on my Euro pass, and I was offered $200 to get my hair cut. All right, let's go. Let's go. And as a result of that, this person, Monsieur Jongeras, or who ended up being Senor Jongeras, discovered me. So he discovered me this way. It's a very short story. I was still me in that context. And what I saw when I came for the prep, for the workshops, was that all the models were running around, but I thought I could give something. So I took $100 that I had, because I had $200, and I spent $100 on croissant for everybody. And I passed out croissant. And he sort of saw that. And then the next day when we were in the show, and I was one of his models, and he was supposed to cut my hair from my waist to my elbow, and instead cut it to my chin.
What is that called? A bob?
It's called tears. Crying, sobbing backstage.
Yeah.
And he came to me and he said, why are you crying? And I said, you cut my hair. And he said, se me fue la tijera. And I said, what does that mean? He said, the scissor got away from me. I'm sorry. And because he was honest with me, I said, okay, it's okay. And he said, but what are you doing here? I said, I'm looking for a nanny job. And he said, come to Barcelona.
Oh my God.
And I was like, wait a minute. Who's this guy?
Yeah.
So anyway, to close the story, I did end up getting a nanny job. It was to work for the editor of Vogue. I had 2 weeks before my job started. Again, I had $200 because they'd paid me $100 to cut my hair. So $200 back again. Weeks left on my Euro pass, a week left. So I went to Barcelona.
Wow.
And there he offered me to be his muse, to which I was like, and he said, well, what do you want? And I said, well, can't I work in your office? And he said, well, what do you know how to do in an office? Have you ever worked in an office? And I said, well, I type 45 words a minute. And he said, come back tomorrow. The next day, he came back, same place, same restaurant. He poured champagne. He lifted his glass and he said, to the new secretary of my new international division. And in that moment, I became the secretary of his international division, which didn't actually exist. But because of his unreasonableness, the man was completely unreasonable. He would say, go to Germany and find me a partner. He'd say, go to Italy, find me a partner. And I'd say, what do you want them to be like? This. Okay. I get on the plane and go and do it.
Wow.
And so because of his unreasonableness, I learned how to launch products and services. We did pasarela, we did stages, we did all kinds of things. And by the time I hit 24 and was ready to leave there, moved to New York, New York.
Of course. Oh my gosh.
It was just because it was the closest part in the U.S. to Europe. At that point, I had the opportunity to launch Revlon into Puerto Rico.
Wow.
So as a result of that, I learned that I didn't have to have a boss telling me to be unreasonable. I could just do unreasonable things and it would be okay.
And it would be okay.
And I've been doing it ever since.
And still unreasonable till
I'm completely
today.
unreasonable.
I love it. That's so unique. You're such a good storyteller. Our audience is just going to eat this up. You're so cool.
I'm telling you the truth. I mean, I love every minute of my day.
Sure.
Even when I'm running around going, I need a break. I need a potty break. I still am loving my life. I love my life. Because I'm empowering people to have their dream.
Sure. That is so cool. Okay, so tell me about your journey to Armenia. This is so cool. I'm just so excited that you're in Armenia, spending so much time with different organizations, doing your thing. So tell me about Armenia. How did you get here? And what's kind of your mission while you're in our country?
Right. So I've been working with the U.S. State Department for many years. In fact, so in my own work and partially with the U.S. State Department, I've worked in 76 countries and across 65 industries. And so one of the things that I've done with the U.S. State Department is to launch and grow startup ecosystems. And I've been doing that for over a decade.
Okay.
And so one of the things I did this year was, I guess, in February or March, I was sent to Pakistan. Now, Pakistan is a very interesting place for a woman to go, especially a woman like me who's pretty outspoken and who doesn't really conform.
A little different.
A little different than what you'd expect in Pakistan. So there I was doing this tour, and it turned out to be very successful for them. There was like 52 pieces of news, and it was, it went very well. And as I came home in March, my phone rang, and it was the embassy in Armenia. And they said, "We want you to come to Armenia." And I was like, "Okay." And I'm like, where's Armenia? Okay, this is truth.
Yeah. No, totally.
I was like, Armenia? Where? I'd say Azerbaijan?
No, absolutely not.
Where is it in relation? What are the borders? Where is it?
Yeah.
And I started looking, and I started reading about Armenia, and I became fascinated.
Of course.
Armenia is amazing. The things that have happened in Armenia in millennia past, and the way that the Armenian people have approached the potential of life has been amazing. And I was so delighted and so honored to have the opportunity to come. And in the course of the time, since then, we've been meeting every 2 weeks, talking about what I can do and what can happen here. And they built out this wonderful program. They've done an amazing job to build out a program. And every time I've said, well, couldn't we talk to these people too? Can't we meet with these guys also? Because one of the things that's really important when building a startup ecosystem is to include all of the ecosystem.
Absolutely.
And if you don't include everyone, it grows kind of lopsided, and it has a much harder time gaining strength. And so since I'm only here a week, I'm here 8 days, I wanted to be able to touch as many areas of the ecosystem as possible and help as many people grow their vision as possible.
Have you had an opportunity to meet with a lot of because, we're considered as the Silicon Mountains of this side of the world. That's what,
good.
I guess what we'd like to be branded as.
Good.
Because we have so much potential here, and these very successful companies have come out of this country. A lot of them actually started by our alumni. I don't know if you've heard of the Pixar app or CRISP, the co-founders or the founders of those, companies now. I guess they were startups at some point, but they're all graduates of the American University. So we take great pride in that. So have you had a chance to meet with the entrepreneurs, startup leaders in the country? And what are your impressions so far?
Yeah, so I had my first full day of programming yesterday.
Okay.
I met with the AUA, which is like 50 women entrepreneurs, followed by a roundtable of the ecosystem leaders.
Okay.
Now, it was supposed to be somewhere between 20 and 25 people. I think it turned out to be like 30 people. Now, when you get 30 alphas in one room, it was a rock and rollin' meeting. It was rocking. I mean, everybody had what they needed to say.
Sure.
It was intense.
Good.
It was very intense. And so there were angel investors. There were people who were from various regional enterprises. There were people who are in more like NGO area. There were people across the ecosystem. And I am not going to be able to tell you that I remember everybody's name.
Sure.
Because I could not pronounce half of them.
Names are fine. I feel like it's the last names that are complicated, right?
I mean, I'm just like, Armenian has a very particular.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of words yet.
That's
Not
okay.
yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Not
But your
yet.
journey continues. This is your second day in Armenia, right?
Yes,
So you're
yes.
going to be here for the rest of the week.
That's right. And each day there was about 10 hours of programming. So it's basically there are a series of 3-hour workshops, and then there were like 2-hour roundtables, and then there was a big public forum. There's a big public forum coming up. But mostly they're workshops in which I'm hoping to listen to what the challenges are and give frameworks that have worked in other locations around the world so that people can choose what they might want to try.
Good. So it's like different opportunities for different
groups.
Different groups. Awesome.
That's right.
Perfect. All right. Okay, my dear. Following question. With your extensive working globally, actually. I mean, your CV is so impressive. Different groups, different sectors across the world. I think it will be kind of interesting for our audiences to also hear kind of your thoughts and feedback about what are some of the most important leadership skills or qualities that you have seen in CEOs or companies of successful companies with successful CEOs. Is there like a formula almost? Is there a trend globally?
Yeah, there is. There definitely is. And I want to make sure to answer a question that you asked earlier, which I want to make sure to put on the table.
Yeah.
I think that there is one key issue in Armenia so far, but that's having been here 2 days. Okay, so I could be wrong. Could easily be wrong. This is what I think it is, though.
Okay.
What I think is that in Armenia, there's like 30% of the Armenians in the world. In the United States, there's 15% of the Armenians in the world.
Sure.
And the Armenian diaspora in the United States is supporting Armenia as Armenia, living in Armenia, being victims. This is not a good approach. This is not a good approach. Why? Because it's kind of a parent-child approach. And what I would love to see happen is for that to be transformed into an eye-to-eye approach in which it's that you have an idea for a startup, let me empower you.
Sure.
You have an idea for new business that you want to grow, I would like to support you. Not this, things are going terribly, let me dig you out because I'm guilty, I feel guilty. And so that's a very overly direct thing that I might be saying. But what I really want to say is that the opportunity in Armenia is immense. And the number of people I've met who have brilliant ideas for businesses, who are brilliant people, but who have a feeling of being victims. They're operating as victims. And that is not the attitude that you have to have when you grow a business. The attitude of a successful entrepreneur is an I choose attitude, not of, oh my gosh, I'm in a bad situation. And so I would like to link the strength of the diaspora support, of which there is much.
Of course. Yeah.
To the strengths of the people living in Armenia, not the strengths to the weaknesses. So that's what I would really love to put forward. And that Armenia deserves to have a country brand. A country brand. Because the country of Armenia, everything that I've encountered is amazing.
Of course.
The food is amazing. The people are amazing. The startups are amazing. Who knows where Armenia is? Please, what is going on?
Sure.
I was even told at a university where I teach, UC Berkeley, which is the #1 university in the world for startups, the #1 university to fund female founders, There's 7 Armenian companies that have
Skytech, Berkeley Skytech.
Well, hello. I teach there. I never bumped into anybody from Armenia. Where are these people?
Yeah.
Where are these people?
Sure.
Okay, so finishing that question.
Yeah.
Next question, leadership.
Leadership.
The most important characteristic of successful leadership
is
flexible leadership.
Oh, I like
style.
that.
So here's what happens. There are a whole bunch of different leadership styles. There are 4 main styles. Of those 4, the 2 are stable compliant, which is a type of a leadership style that's for leading teams. And then there is dominant and influencer. Now, the majority of startups are led by influencer types. Influencer dominant. But at the end of the day, when you have to get a result, it's not about you. It's about the people you're getting the result with. And so the people that you're getting a result with need to follow either someone who is influencing or someone who is being compliant, and they therefore need to be compliant, or somebody who's dominant, like, hey, go do this now. And so a leader who is a good leader is able to move their leadership style as needed. It's a piano. You can play pop, you can play jazz, you can play classic. It doesn't matter. You have to move your leadership towards the result that you're trying to get.
So with that in mind, what is the top piece of advice that you give to young aspiring entrepreneurs, or will you be giving to Armenian entrepreneurs too?
Think big.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
So one of the challenges that young entrepreneurs have is that the tendency to be reasonable, like too reasonable, stunts their growth. So they're doing the thing that they think they ought to do. They're doing the thing that they think they can do. They're not doing the thing they want to do. And when you do the thing you want to do, you unlock all of the possibilities. You unlock support when you decide to speak of your vision. That's when people get behind you. But if you're reasonable and you say, we're going to do this, then we're going to do that, then we're going to do this, and it's all very minimalistic, it doesn't excite engagement.
But don't you behave with kind of reason due to fear also? So then, how do you, what's your advice on that? Like, how do you overcome the fear of failure or making mistakes? Especially, I can't imagine for young entrepreneurs that are kind of, they have people that look up to them, investors that have invested money into their ideas. I can't imagine the amount of pressure, the fear that they have, right? To kind of do this big kind of vision and the thinking and like following what they believe.
Yeah. So fear is energy. You can name it fear.
Or you can
name it something else.
Okay.
A rose is a rose. So here's the thing. The reason why I have this slinky sitting here is because every startup is a system. And if you do nothing with it, it just sits there, okay? But actually a startup and all ecosystems follow all three of Newton's laws. And what I mean by that is that if you let it sit, it sits. If you give it movement, it moves between all of the things that need to happen. And the amount of energy you put into it is the amount you get back. And if you stop, it stops. So fear is just an expression of stopping. Fear is a consideration that everything will end. But nothing ends if you keep putting in energy. That's why the concept of a pivot is such a big concept in a company. A company has 5 steps. Idea, product or service, measure client response, pivot, all companies pivot, and then grow or exit entirely. But in that pivot is the recognition that it's not about you. It's about the customer. And you have to pivot towards what they really want, towards what they really need, which oftentimes they don't even know what they need. But it is your job as the leader of the startup with your values and what is causing you to pursue that result for them to discover what it is. That's your role. That's your job.
Sure.
And when you are going after something that is that important, there's no room for fear. Fear has no space.
I like that. I think we're going to totally quote that in the post that we're going to write about this podcast.
Okay. Well, you're welcome to. It's what I truly believe. It's just, fear comes from this notion of yes, no, right, wrong, good, bad. In the space of a startup, you're continually discovering, you're experimenting, you're persevering. There's no sensation of right and wrong in what it is you're trying. You're experimenting, you're playing. You're playing in the field of possibilities.
Sure. And we learn by playing. That's one of my favorite things to say.
Exactly. Now, when I say there's no right wrong, you have to follow the rules of the company and the country. But what I mean is you can try any packaging. You can try any UI. You can try any solution. I don't want to name big startups all over the world that have tried things that people said couldn't be done, but we all know them.
Sure, of course.
We all know them. I'm not even going to bother naming them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your comment about the flexibility also plays a key role in that. Is the idea of being flexible with your idea and kind of getting feedback from the customers and so on. What about the differences between male and female entrepreneurs? I know that you work with a lot of female entrepreneurs and you're going to be spending a lot of time here talking to a lot of young women working to start their companies and so on. So do you see a difference between male and female entrepreneurs, different leadership styles, different management styles?
Yeah. So this is a very interesting question for me, Narek, because I've recently changed my mind about this.
Okay.
So I used to insist that I am not a female CEO. I would go on platform and they would introduce me as a female CEO. I'd say, I'm not a female CEO.
I'm a CEO.
This is not a male CEO. There's a CEO and I'm a CEO. There you go. That's it.
Sure.
We're done. But I recently decided that unless I stand up and say I am a woman CEO, I'm actually losing out on history's greatest opportunity. There has never been a better time to be a woman in the world.
100%. The future is female. I say that. We say that all the time. Absolutely.
So the truth of the matter is that being a woman is more of an advantage now than ever before. So the difference between being a woman CEO or being a woman founder and being a male founder is that there has never been a better time to be a woman. There's never been a better time. Now, I coach equal amount of men as women. I probably have more men than women, actually. Women, I coach more in groups. Men, I coach more one-on-one. And that's because men have a tendency to prefer to spar their thoughts in private. So I act as a sparring partner. They think about what they want to do, and I say, well, what about this? Then they say what they think they might want to do, and I say, well, what about that? And so this sparring partnership is something that's very much one-on-one. It's not usually done in a group setting. So the difference for me in coaching men and women is that women like to be coached in groups. They're very community-oriented, and they like to be coached in groups. Now, it happens to be that founders as a whole like to be in groups. And the number one thing that causes founders to succeed is to be in a community. This is the number one thing. So 70% of founders that succeed experience being in a founder community. And so that is the most important thing for people in general, but for women in particular. But in terms of what it's like to coach women or what it's like to coach men, some men are very female. Some women are very male. If you label their characteristics, I'm just not that much into labeling.
Sure. Absolutely.
So a person is a person for me.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And leadership styles are a leadership style that they're choosing in that moment.
Sure.
Now, it is true. It is absolutely true that historically women have had a harder time getting funding. That's not true now.
Okay.
It is historically true that women have had to dance backwards to Fred Astaire's Dancing Forward. Not currently true. And it has also been true that strong women have been seen as a negative. It's not currently true. Also, it was never before shown so clearly and so obviously. Women-run corporations have higher profitability, higher innovation, higher employee retention. And so at this point, it's like, okay.
Let the data speak for itself.
Okay, let's go.
Sure.
Let's go.
Sure. I had the pleasure of doing a workshop with Margaret, actually, in the U.S. Embassy funded project, the female entrepreneurship program that they had. And it was just such a pleasure working with them and just kind of, I think I did communications management or something like that. But in any case, it was very fun. Speaking of coaching, so I'm curious to know, what are some of your greatest challenges or successes you have experienced while coaching startups or entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so my personal greatest challenge is that sometimes I end up engaged with people who hire me because they want to be told that what they're doing is right. And I graduate those people very quickly because I can't contribute to them. Because they just want to tell me what they're doing, and what they're doing is right. And that's actually not my role in the world. My role in the world is to discover what's next, what's around the next corner. Who am I and who do I need to be in order to lead what wants to happen next? And if a person that is hiring me just wants to be told that they're right and what they're doing is right, then they don't need me.
Sure.
They could just pay somebody, $10 an hour to do that and, keep going.
Sure.
So my biggest challenge is in working with people who don't have a big vision and who are not interested in the necessity to transform yourself in order to transform your business, in order to transform the world. And it begins with us. And if I don't transform, my business is not going to transform. The world is going to stay as it is. It's a transformation cycle, which is also why I go back to the slinky, because it's energy that's just flowing through. So it begins with us. And so that is my personal biggest challenge. Now, if you want stories about startups, what I'm going to tell you is this. When I coach startups, it's a sacred space. And nothing goes beyond the sacred space. So I would never tell a name or tell a circumstance.
Of course.
I can give you general ideas.
That's perfect.
General ideas. So here's one of the biggest challenges I ever had. I was working with a startup that I was very much enjoying. I was launching that company in 15 countries across Latin America, and it was a hardware company, and I was having a great time doing that. And they were receiving a very large shipment of their hardware from Shenzhen.
Okay.
And the shipment was lost.
That happens.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
So it's not just my shoes that get lost in shipping.
That's right.
Okay.
It just so happens that the powers that be sometimes have shipments get lost.
Wow.
And there's no way to actually insure against that. You can't insure against it because if you have a deliverable date and you have to deliver that product to those outlets and you miss the date,
Sure.
and it kills your startup.
Sure.
Okay? So in that case, that's what happened.
Okay. So how did...
That startup was killed.
Wow.
Yeah, because the containers went missing at sea.
Wow. And there's no coming back from that.
Well, the company continued to do a little this, a little that. But what happens with companies is that there are cycles of development, there are cycles of growth, and in that time, we had attained a placement level that was very high across Latin America. We were beginning to enter Europe. We had big placement in the United States in very high-named, big-box stores. And once you blow it at that level...
There's no coming back from that.
Well, you have to... I mean, it's ground zero again.
Sure. Wow.
So, yeah. So that was a challenge.
That was... Okay. So we're kind of... to time, but I want to end on a much more positive note.
Yes.
So talk about the successes of your coaching, your career. What are your kind of positive notes that we should sum up our convo today?
So here's what I would like to say. In the time that I've been working with people, I have worked with over 1 million startups across 76 countries, and I stopped counting the number of startups. And I stopped counting the number of countries. Armenia is not in that count. Pakistan is not in that count. Mongolia is not in that count. And what I have learned is that if you want to start a startup, if you have an idea, now is the best time. There's no other time than now, because that startup is part of you. And what you have to contribute to the world is part of you. And when you express that creative part of you and you link to the community who wants that, who is waiting for that, who may not even know that they want that and they are waiting for that, and you link it to commerce, in that effort between creativity and community and commerce, we are creating one world. And in creating one world, I promise you, that's how we all have peace. The wars subside, and we're all living together. And that's my big vision. That is my big vision. And I can tell you, in every single country that I've been in, every country where I have helped to build a startup ecosystem and supported the local leaders to have, do, and be what they can have, do, and be, there is peace, there is happiness, and that financial stability grows and grows and grows.
Sure.
And so for me, as capitalistic as it sounds, I truly believe in bringing forth who you truly are. your creative self, to link to your community and create commerce so that we can all be in this one world. And that is the greatest success story that there can be in my career. And for me, it is what I live for, to create that ambiance all over the world.
I absolutely love that. Cheryl, it was such a pleasure, honestly. You remind me so much of home. Well, my second home, because this is my home. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
And thanks to our listeners for following our podcast today. Thank you.
Bye for now.